in thinking through the situation in Chicago and what is happening right now, I perhaps start by saying this: keep close attention not only to the type of immiseration, right? That they create the intentional creation of misery that the federal government is seeking to unleash against the community, the ways that they are instigating communities to respond with violence, right? To what it is, not only a militarization of the city, right, but a violent overtake of our communities to intentional acts of resistance to then escalate, right, the violence against the communities writ large. I think we have to be paying close attention to what is happening in Chicago and what is potentially happening in Portland, right? Because the playbook that wants to be rolled out nationally is being tested, right? Being put in this place to see how the city, how the citizens respond. And a few days ago, Mayor Brennan was correct, Mayor Brian Jones of Chicago, saying that the people have been calmed, right, in the response. And because we have been calmed, the violent escalation continues to happen, right? And that is the provocation that we're seeing. And this is not anything new. This is historically the tactic that we have seen happening over and over again. And I think it's also a moment for communities to really reactivate our historical memories in the ways in which we needed to organize in the 60s and 70s, particularly the Black and Brown communities, to come together with a particular message of unity and a joint message of how we thrive collectively. And faith communities play a big role in that. So I am a theological educator and a faith leader. And I can say that in my most honest days in these roles, I have a sense that both theological education and being part of a faith community that take their call with due seriousness, meaning that we are not just playing church, right, or playing theological schools, but instead we are choosing intentionally, pastorally, prophetically, right, to be a living church to all of us, should come with a content warning of sorts, right, a warning of the work that we're doing. And this is because whatever else the theological task may be, whatever else the ministries we may want to be doing and unfolding in the world, if we are honest to the call of our time, it is to be faithful to have a concrete, contextual, and collective understanding of what is impacting our communities and expanding the understanding of who is our neighbor and what is our responsibility to the neighbor. And that means that kind of analysis is the kind of analysis that really compel us towards collective liberation, right? Because it is something that we learn not only from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? That if one of us is not free, no one is free. But we also heard that from other figures like Fannie Lou Hamer, right? That my freedom is shackled and chained to yours, right? And I think that is something important to keep in mind, right, in this work. And the more I think about the nature of our collective liberation and the ways in which addressing poverty connects with anything else that we want to address as a social issue, whether it is ecological justice, domestic violence, education, housing, healthcare, and so on and so forth, it is all connected, right, to one particular dynamic that we need to address, and is how our resources share in a community, who share in those resources, and to what extent are the life made possible because of those resources. So I think for me, right, then paying attention to our collective liberation, it really starts to pay closer attention, right, with intent towards collective liberation, anyone who we may call the least of this. And because of that, I feel that Chicago poet Gwendolyn Brooks was so insightful in her words, penning and celebration of Paul Robinson, right? That saying that we are each other's harvest, we are each other's business, and we are each other's magnitude and bond. And for me, that's been so powerful the last few months, reflecting in those lines, where what are the ways in which we are each other's harvest, which means that we have to first prepare the ground, we have to plant, we have to cultivate, we have to tend, and there will be moments in which we have to also weed, right? Because not everything that grows in the garden is well preserving and cultivating. And you do have not only to clean up the weeds, but sometimes make a little bit of space, right? So that plants can grow stronger. It is important. That means that then we have to be each other's business, right? We have to be mindful of how we are with one another. What is our connections to one another? How are we developing those bonds of communities so that we can all thrive? Because then we are each other's magnitude and bond. And that is important. So I think what you're seeing in Chicago now is really the emergence of our collective understanding that is happening not only through very intense and intentional organizing at different levels, both at the state level, right, from political offices and government, but also from community spaces of community organizing, schools, communities of faith, and also other secular spaces coming together, both intentionally and at times organically, right, to offer a moment of deep resistance, right, at this juncture in time. And when I think of this, if there's something that I want to leave you all is to understand, maybe to inspire you, right, to encourage you, to exhort you, right, to think about three sacred actions, right, that we can take as a community of resistance. So whatever you call your faith home, whoever your people are, there are perhaps three things that you can bring with you as practices. The first one I will call the practice of radical hospitality, right? And what I think of radical hospitality, perhaps a little bit different than in other contexts, because what I mean by radical hospitality is for us to start paying attention to the work that we can actively do to dismantle systems that are intended to exclude and marginalize. And that means that we have to open up, right, our broader understanding into the world, our listening and attention to others, so that we can think about what are impacting our accessibility, our inclusion, our thriving. And that also means that when we extend hospitality, if it's radical hospitality, is going to take us into places in which our own boundaries of comfort will be tested, right, and stretch. And I think that as we're facing, right, the rising threat of authoritarianism, radical hospitality then becomes one of those acts of resistance, right? When forces of division that are seeking to separate us either by race, religion, nationality, economic status, um, when we start welcoming the stranger in a more intentional way, then we have a powerful counter narrative, right, to the politics of fear that the world is trying to push on us. The second practice that I will commend to us is the building of networks of mutual care. And I think this mutual care will be possible when we recognize the mental interdependence in one another. So this will be networks that will function not only in times of crisis, even though it is the current crisis that is activating right the need to develop these networks, but it should continue right after the crisis abate. Because I, for one, do not believe, and I will resist the notion, right, so that this current administration will have the last word, right? That was not going to be the case. This moment shall pass. But after this pass, we're going to have a long and hard moment of healing, not only healing the nation, healing our community. I will say, as many of us, I'm going to dare to say, have experienced even the fractures in our own personal family life with friends and dear ones, right? That we do have to engage in some honest repair work, and it's not going to be easy. So we're going to need those networks of mutual care and mutual support so that we can do that particular work. So this is not only around sharing resources, it is about sharing time. It is about sharing skills. It is about sharing companionship, listening ears, right? It is about understanding that there will be times in which some of us perhaps have to make a choice, right, to stay in what I'm calling the safer side of courage, right, so that we can rest, so that we can restore. But that does not mean that we're hanging out the gloves, we're not in the fight, right? We just need a moment, right, to be restored, so that then we can step with others, right? In that braver side of courage, right? That will lead us into some, whether it's direct action, direct witness, prophetic calling, whether it's writing, singing, moving, making sure that activists have enough food and water, right? So they can resist, or if I like to say, enough water and milk sometimes in these moments, and you know what that may mean, so that they can be within the boundaries that are as possible, as safe as possible. So I think that is the second action, right? Building the networks of mutual care and support. And the third, I think, is really there will be the time in which, in our own moments, in our own personal lives, we are going to be called into prophetic action, right? Whatever that means within the comfort and your willingness, right? To think, to make that assessment of what is that going to look like for you and your family and yours, those who love you well, and having that conversation. Because prophetic action that we need at these moments, right, will be ones that speak truth about the racism that we face, speaks truth about the injustices of who do we call our neighbor and who belongs in the nation. It will be also about who gets to have an education in our own middle schools and high schools without fearing being pulled out. And I can attest to you anytime one of those quote unquote hardened criminals, right? Which, come on, let's face it. What are we talking about, right? When ICE goes into a school and pull out a child, right, a minor by force, it's not only that child that is traumatized, it's the teachers, the staff, their peers, their communities, their friends, right? That only happens because they want us to be in fear. Period. And a friend of mine, Dr. Heather Elkins, recently reminded me that courage is fear that have said its prayers, right? That what courage is. And I think that is a moment in which, in these moments of fear, right, saying our prayers so that we can have that courage, it is important and it is critical. So the third action, right, to do our calculus, right, do our assessment, that when we are called upon, what is the prophetic action that we can take to be agents of change, transformation, and justice in the world, to ensure that we play our part, that violence, fear, and hate don't have the last word. And thank you all for the opportunity to be here. And as we say in the Pro People's campaign, right, forward together and not one step back.